Thanks, Trevor. Morning, everyone. Some familiar names on the screen at the moment, and obviously a few of you joined us for the pre-networking event the other night. So I hope that works well for people. As Trevor said, I want to talk to you a little bit about energy freedom and what that means and how that links to net zero. So just skip on a slide, please, Richard. So energy freedom is a concept that is our version, which I want to explain a little bit this morning. Richard is joining me. He's one of my colleagues, head of the projects division. He's going to take you through a little bit more detail in terms of the things that you need to think about. So if you could switch on again. So just to sort of take a little brief look at sort of how it came together, really. So Zenergi, a lot of you hopefully know and love in terms of our presence and capabilities in the education sector, but primarily with schools. We acquired a business called Briar Associates that have a lot of expertise, engineering expertise, that covers central government, NHS, universities, and have worked a lot with the Carbon Trust. So for us, this was a fantastic opportunity to put together a proposition and a concept that helped people on this journey, and used our expertise and our experience both in the industry but also as technical engineers in order to help you guys going forward. So again, you can just come for me, please, Richard. So, you know, what is energy freedom? I guess in my mind, energy freedom is freedom from waste. It's freedom from suppliers. It could even be freedom from the grid. But the most important one for me is that it's freedom from those annual increases that each year they say, right, it's gone up 20%. You know, the wholesale market itself might have come down, but actually the network charges and the fixed charges that are associated with energy nowadays means that you keep having to make room in your budget for energy to keep increasing. And, you know, for me, we want to give you control. We want to help you make the right decisions in order to drive that cost down from an energy perspective, but also the impact on the environment. So most importantly, it's about your definition of energy freedom. For one school, it might be, I want to be generating as much electricity as I use, and, you know, therefore we want to be net zero. For another school, it may just be mitigating those increasing costs, but it's about understanding what you want to try and achieve, and that's what matters. Our job as Zenergi is to help you create that long-term horizon plan. So understanding what those priorities are. You know, you guys are the experts. You guys are the ones that understand that, yes, I can change my LED lights. Yes, I can change my boilers. Yes, I can, you know, put some solar panels on the roof. But actually, it's about understanding where you should spend that time and effort and money in terms of creating a cohesive plan. And, you know, that's something that Richard's going to touch on in terms of how it's not so much about the technologies, but it's about having a plan and having the right advice in order to understand where you go first. So in summary from me, we believe, you know, the journey to energy freedom is not only better for you, but it's better for the planet. And hopefully Richard will be able to walk you through some of the finer details now.
Thank you, Graham, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining the session. Yeah, as Graham said, I think today is hopefully more about the journey for you and giving you an idea about how you start that journey. I guess you're all at different stages of your journey with energy and decarbonisation and sustainability. But what we really wanted to do is to give you the tools and the ideas to be able to take you from where you are at the moment to perhaps where you need to be to kind of achieve the really significant targets that hopefully we're all looking to try and, or we all have aspirations towards. So moving forward, I think it's probably even more important if any of you saw my colleague Ed's presentation yesterday. So given the recent funding that's been announced by Salex to look at heat decarbonisation and also to benefit from other opportunities, it's kind of unprecedented times, really. You as organisations now, I think, have a a wonderful opportunity to engage with the private sector and to engage with organisations to look at decarbonisation, to create a strategy, to then put some applications in to hopefully be successful with those applications and actually get some work done to achieve your goals. Now, we will try and leave a little bit of time at the end of this for questions today. So if you do have any, please think about them and we'll try and deal with them at the very end of the session. Now, I guess before we think about the journey, I think what we wanted to do is to put some context around that journey, because I guess looking at these challenges, they're probably ones that you all recognise, but we thought it would be useful to just reference them, because I think it's important that we understand what they are and you understand that we understand these kind of issues that you're facing. Graham touched on it briefly. We've seen energy costs rise over the last 15, 20 years. And again, as Graham kind of alluded to, this isn't necessarily gas at the beach or power at the substation. It's a whole range of non-commodity costs which are starting to increase, which are forcing our bills up. And unfortunately, we don't see that changing at the moment. These subsidies, these costs are going to continue to rise. And as an impact, from a budgetary point of view, you're having to spend more and more on energy. Also, certainly recently, we do an awful lot of work with schools, and we've seen a huge amount of issues and huge amounts of problems around profit and loss, so P&Ls. Budgets have been cut. We've also seen, obviously, the impact of COVID having huge impacts on kind of financial returns and the kind of the profits that organisations have been able to make through things like catering. So we're now trying to work with schools to, well, how can we readjust that situation? How can we use energy as a vehicle rather than a threat? How can we use it as an opportunity to kind of push you forward and actually do something about some of these issues that you're starting to see? And historically as well, that kind of leads on to, we've seen historic lacks of funding towards infrastructure. So it's not uncommon for us to see old and failing infrastructure, especially around heating, certainly also around electrical infrastructure. So it's what can we do around those areas to break the cycle, really, and take you from a position where you've got old and failing infrastructure to new kit, efficient kit that's generating an income for you and that is really future-proofing your organisations. I guess you've all seen this, we see it all the time. It's do more with less. And in a climate where costs are increasing and your kind of budgets are being squeezed, it makes a very difficult situation for you. And it's really interesting, actually, because typically after wages, typically energy is the second highest kind of thing on the agenda and the second highest spend that your organisations have. So historically, it's something that's probably received less time, less resource and other things, but it's actually one of the most important things within your kind of organisation. So what we want to do is we want to remove all of that waste, remove all of that negativity and actually turn it into something quite positive for you. Now, I guess that's your challenge, but it's everybody's challenge. And certainly from a Zenergi point of view, we're exceptionally passionate about the idea of energy freedom and getting to that point. But it's not just about you, it's about us as a whole kind of planet, really. And just a few little points here that I'm just kind of looking at. The ice caps are melting at a rate of roughly 9% annually. We've seen this. We see sea levels rising. We see a lack of natural habitat for mammals that are living in these areas. CO2 levels are continuing to increase. Natural habitats being destroyed. Temperatures are higher. We're in a position now where it's everybody's responsibility to do something about this, because every ton of carbon that we can save is going to have an impact on these kind of bigger challenges that we all face together. You'll have all seen these kind of different bands, these issues, these names. So back in the 1980s, I guess we saw global warming. It became a thing. People were talking about it. Probably more recently, in the 90s, we moved over to climate change. And then certainly more recently, things like climate crises, climate emergencies have been declared. And from a scene setting point of view, it's hugely important because the words crisis and emergency really do stimulate a particular kind of vision about what's going on. and it's all our part. We all can play a part in this to kind of decarbonise our own estates. And we see this, last year was unprecedented for rainfall. So UK, Venice, Japan, we all saw huge amounts of rain. I myself, Graham knows this, was unfortunately subject to flooding. So I apologise if you hear any noise, because I'm still having work done to get my property back to a position where we are secure from flooding moving forward. So everybody's affected. It's not just on the news. We're all impacted by this. We also saw fires, huge bushfires in Australia, fires over in the States, huge amounts of deforestation, huge amounts of loss of habitat. So this is all making a huge impact on the planet, and climate disasters are something that really we all should be considering. And what does that mean financially? Well, £500 billion it's estimated that climate disasters and climate change is costing us globally. And if you put that into context, I haven't quite done the sums, but if you imagine we had £500 billion to spend on solar or heating or infrastructure or whatever it might be, we could do a huge amount of good with that amount of money. But at the moment, we are, as a country, as a planet, firefighting, because we are dealing with these huge issues that aren't going away. So from our point of view, energy, yes, you've all got a journey, you're all going to start that journey, and it's important that we can give you the right tools to kind of reduce your impact on your organisation and your community. But energy freedom and an energy journey is everybody's journey, it's everybody's responsibility. And what we think here is that your estate genuinely can be a vehicle for change. So there really are significant opportunities that you can address in order to deliver these kind of savings. So from our point of view, we want to get you to net zero, and what we really want to focus on is the basics. What can we do to get you using less kilowatts? It always has to be the most important point to start. Use less is always going to be the right starting point. However, there are more and more opportunities now that we see moving forward for on-site generation. And when we think about the concept of energy freedom, I think part of that concept for us is, well, what proportion of your power or your heating can we take off-grid? How much can you producing yourselves? And there are a number of really good opportunities out there now for you to kind of consider these kind of things. We want to look at how you manage energy as well. So it's not just about the physical assets, I think, as Graham alluded to. It's what you do with energy and how you manage it, which is going to be as equally as important as the assets that you have on the estate. And really, we want to start that journey. We want to build that business case. We want to give you a holistic approach, because there's a whole range of different things that kind of go into the mix here. But what we want to make sure is they're the right things at the right time on your journey, so that you see the kind of results and the largest impact possible. You've all got a deck, I'm sure. It's our ambition really to get the kind of the G, Fs and Es up to A, Bs and Cs. Wouldn't it be fantastic if we could walk into organisations and see those kind of levels of performance? And how do we do this? So from our point of view, really, it's starting with something very simple, and it's as simple as a basic energy assessment. It sounds perhaps really basic when you consider the magnitude of the kind of the problems we're talking about. But what we want to do is get you to position.
One that we didn't take off. Drop him there.
We've got a youngster joining us. So what we want to do is we want to look at kind of, how can we generate renewables? How can we use renewables? How can we generate heat? How can we generate power? How can we create additional revenue for you? So energy shouldn't just be about saving you money. There should be opportunities here to make money for you and to create additional revenue streams that perhaps your organisations previously haven't had. And most importantly, like we said, give you that plan for change. How can we get you forward into kind of these kind of positions? So from our point of view, it's a very simple process. This is how we engage with all of the schools and all of the clients that we're working with at the moment. We have a very basic first contact. We review client data. So we're looking at half-hourly data, or fuel data, or consumption information. And we start to build up a picture of how you are using energy at your estate, what it's costing you, what you're doing with it, when you're using it. We recently looked at a large grammar school, and when we analysed their data, about 35% of it was during the evening, during hours where there was nobody at school. So a huge proportion of their spend was in a position where there should be no spend or no one there in the building doing anything. So it's understanding how you're using it and what we can do to make a difference. Needs and issues, everybody's slightly different. So, we want to establish what's most important to you. We then want to build up a proposal for you. So what we actually want to do is give you a workshop, a presentation, something that's tangible, something that you can take you to your executive committees, something you can take to your governors, something you can present that says, this is where we are at the moment, and we can take you from concept through to delivery, and then out the other side to kind of decarbonisation and a much more efficient and effective estate. Now, Graham talked very much in the beginning about that holistic approach, and for us, it's hugely important that we don't silo these kind of things. So energy efficiency is hugely important. You all know things around LED controls, just looking at a list here, heating controls, pumps, motors, inverters, all of these kind of things. It's hugely important, but it's just one part of this. From our point of view, we'd also like you to consider buying better or buying greener. So how do you procure your energy? And can you purchase 100% green energy? Can you purchase 100% biogas, for instance? Can you decarbonise your supply? Because if you can decarbonise the supply that you're purchasing, then you're on a fantastic kind of, your journey is really kind of kick-started. And then we can look at, well, what can we do around energy generation? So can we look at solar? Can we look at perhaps combined heat and powers? Can we look at anaerobic digestion? What opportunities are there for you to generate heat and power yourselves? But it's also considering the entire kind of life cycle of the buildings, how they're designed, how you use land. So we're engaged by more and more organisations, more and more schools who say, well, actually, we've got land. We're not going to do anything with it. What could we do with it? Could we do something around renewables which would allow us to create a revenue stream, allow us to decarbonise, allow us to create our own power or heat, whatever it might be. So it's looking at this as a holistic piece, really. Just before you came on the call, myself and Graham were having a discussion, and we kind of said, well, actually, technology, perversely, is probably the least important part of what we do. The most important part is understanding what you're looking to try and achieve, the timescales in which you're looking to achieve it, and then pulling together this kind of holistic solution which deals with all elements of the kind of the energy journey and this kind of energy picture. And also engagement. I think what's hugely important is if everybody buys into this, then it has it's a greater success rate. So we're talking, teachers, governors, senior leadership teams, pupils. We find, interestingly, actually, when we talk to students and we talk to pupils at schools that we're working with, the more they engage, the more successful projects are. So it's about kind of total involvement, really, and ensuring that everybody understands what the school's looking to achieve, why they're looking to achieve it, and then everybody taking ownership of it. And I think when we see that if everybody takes ownership of these things, then actually they're far more effective, and they really drive through well past the kind of implementation stage, and you start to see the kind of real long-term benefits of this. And that's all great. But I think, the one big challenge is always going to be, and has always been, funding. So hopefully Ed and Salix will have touched on this yesterday. Clearly there is a fantastic and unprecedented opportunity for organisations like yourselves to start considering and start bidding and putting applications together to deal with some of these opportunities. But it's not the only one. So, we're aware that Salix have launched this kind of £1 billion decarbonisation pot. But when you consider the magnitude of the public sector, that perhaps might not go as far as it sounds. So there are other opportunities. So there are corporate PPAs starting to become more and more prevalent in the UK. This is where organisations will essentially sell you power from a generation asset, typically at a rate less than you're paying for from grid supplied power or heat, over a long period of time, maybe 10-15 year period. But it means you're not having to put money into these projects yourselves. You might be required to have an asset on your land, but you don't necessarily need to pay or make the initial capital investment, but it's giving you some savings. We've seen grant funding washing around. Obviously, I think at the moment, Salex is kind of, and this decarbonisation fund is overtaking that. There are also, certainly for the public sector, ESCO models, so guaranteed savings models, excuse me, where again, organisations will make holistic investments in multiple technologies for you, wrap it with a financial guarantee, manage the process for you. So this is all about kind of working in partnership with the private sector over a long period of time to achieve your goals. We've also seen asset finance, so perhaps not as popular as some of the other opportunities here, but we know that it is compliant. We know that it can be created in an off-balance sheet manner, which is keeps everybody from an accountancy point of view happy. And these organisations can structure these financial solutions to ensure that, one, they're compliant for you, but also they work with you as an organisation, because everybody's slightly different. Everybody has slightly different requirements. But the key thing is that you take that first step on your journey and that you start the journey and you actually get something underway. And I think once you've got that underway, you then start to see the kind of the benefits, and then everything else kind of will come, and kind of next steps will follow. So from our point of view, it's hugely important. There's a huge amount of opportunities to kind of get you through to kind of energy freedom, or at least start you on the journey towards energy freedom. I hope that's been useful for you. I hope it's been interesting. Again, when you put it in the context of the money from Salex that's been announced, I think there's a huge opportunity for you all to engage and to kind of move this forward. So I guess at this point, thank you very much for your time. Hopefully we have some questions, and myself and Graham will do our best to answer them.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I know there are a few questions come in, and I think just, a general sort of statement from me, I suppose, in relation to some of those. I think the reality is that it's very difficult to give advice or say that this is the technology you should be using, or these are the things that you're trying to put in place. As Richard says, it very much is about understanding your site and understanding where you are. But I think more importantly, and I think Ian, member of the Zenergi family, raised a question in terms of the reality of costs continuing to rise from the government. So you take a step forward, you make a change, or you invest in something, and you feel like then you're taking one or two steps back. And I think that's what's important about kind of taking control and coming away from, ultimately the government's route to charging you for that is through the energy suppliers, is through the grid and those network charges. So if a proportion of your energy isn't through that route, then you've got a proportion of protection there as well. And I think just on the funding point, obviously funding is always a challenge for schools and lots of organisations. But I think the key here for me is it's always a challenge for you guys to understand, do I take some money now and invest now that's going to pay off in 10 years time when I've got a completely different cohort of children in school? But the kind of funding and options that are in place enable you to spread that so that it's not kind of taking from the children now and giving it to the children of the future. It's something that is a journey and something that is moving you in the direction you want to go specifically for your school. So hopefully that helps give a little bit of context. But is there any sort of specific ones we want to sort of try and answer live now, Ree?
Hi, yeah, as I said, there are a couple that have come through. What we'll do is we'll make sure we provide answers to them in the marketplace. So any that we don't have a chance to get to today, we can do that. I think the first one that came in is, what do you see as realistic goals for school leaders to be setting? Given the current demands on our time, what should we prioritise as quick wins?
Good question. I think from a quick win point of view, I think certainly, and it depends on everybody's individual situation, I think it would certainly be interesting to look at how you're purchasing your energy, because I think projects are great, but they take a long time, they're hard work. So I would look at how you're purchasing your energy, whether there's an opportunity to switch to green energy, because I think if you that's one way of decarbonising your supply immediately. I think post that, it's then really understanding, like I said, having a plan, understanding exactly what opportunities you have in front of you. From a technology point of view, things like LED lighting will always be a quick win. It's tangible, it's fundable, it makes an obvious statement, makes an obvious difference. It'll make fairly significant savings and pay back pretty quickly. So things like that are obviously, things work to start with. But I think the other important thing is some of these quick wins can help pay for the larger, bigger ticket items over a period of time. So it's understand that entire picture, get someone to do that for you and present it, and then think about how you look at the quick wins.
I think I'd also just add to that in terms of managing energy. If you go away today and it's obvious, but turn off everything that is using energy in your school straight away, that's money in your pocket. Clearly, it's not feasible from an operational perspective, but it's that behavioural change that comes with a number of different things. It's not that we're short of technology to achieve these things, but I think someone mentioned, Hayley mentioned about the air quality. Well, actually, there's lots of schools that have really good air quality and have really good technology that manages that for them. But they've perhaps had a new school or had funding to do that. So it's about understanding if that's important. How do we make sure that's part of your plan, and at what point can it be funded through the savings that you're making on the broader energy costs, if that makes sense.
We're out of time, but maybe if you just take one more for us. Do you have any specific tips on how to work towards net zero with old listed buildings?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think it goes down to selecting the right partners who have the experience of working in those areas, because listed buildings do have huge amounts of challenges with heating networks, with windows, with insulation, with fabric, and there's a lot you can do with them, but also there's an awful lot you can't do. So I think from my point of view, it would be pick a partner, but picks a partner who really understands and has previously worked with and can demonstrate a track record in dealing with grade 1, grade 2 listed buildings, because there's plenty that can be done, but you've got to understand that it's very different than dealing with a normal traditional academy, for instance.
I think also, just to add to that, maybe obvious, but we work a lot with a number of independent schools that have got those type of buildings, and actually what they focus on is the external nature. So they don't focus quite so much on the building itself, where they feel like they're constrained, but can they put electric vehicle charging points in that drives behaviour for their staff and their parents in terms of helping that agenda, but also some of the other things that Richard touched on in terms of the power purchase agreements and the wider renewable opportunities that are there to sort of help drive down the impact on the climate effectively.
Well, we'll take all the other questions and we'll get answers to them posted up today. Thanks, everybody.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.